With his left hand, St. Philip grasps the great cross on which he was tied with ropes, crucified, and stoned to death. The crossbeam is cut horizontally along the upper edge of the composition, and the saint is turning to his left to look at one of his companions with an expression of attention and dialogue.
The representation of St. Thomas is perhaps one of the most elegant portraits in the series, for its composition, its level of draftsmanship, and its delicate colouring. Although Thomas is not shown with his traditional attribute, the carpenter's square, as he is in the version in the Cathedral of Toledo, the model is the same as that to be seen in El Greco's other Apostles series. The iconographical element incorporated here is the shaft of the lance, the instrument of Thomas's martyrdom. This unfinished image of St. Bartholomew is unique in that this disciple is not included in any of El Greco's other Apostle series. The subject's ghost-like appearance, wrapped in white robes, is striking, although technical studies have shown that this may just be the base grisaille that was applied prior to an intended final layer of paint, which was never actually added. In his right hand, St. Bartholomew is holding the knife with which he was skinned alive, and in the left he has a chain attached to a little devil. This recalls the medieval tradition according to which the saint chained up the demon that had carried off the daughter of the king of Armenia.
Here we have a frontal view of the tax collector and evangelist, St. Matthew, aloof and serious in his blue and pink robe, as if he were a dignitary. In his right hand he has a pen, and in the left a large book, the foreshortened volume of which endows the image with a strong sense of depth. St. Matthew was one of the first disciples Jesus called to follow him. He is traditionally represented either as the evangelist, carrying a scroll or a book, or as an apostle with a bag of money as an allusion to his job as a tax collector. Sometimes he also appears with the sword symbolizing his martyrdom. El Greco's portrait of St. John the Evangelist adheres to medieval iconography for the subject, as sustained in the pages of Jacobus de Voragines' 13th century work, The Golden Legend. The apostle is shown holding a chalice with a small dragon visible above its rim. This is a reference to the episode in which an attempt was made to poison him in the temple of Diana at Ephesus. Miraculously, the poison had no effect. The image retains the colors traditionally associated with John, the green robe and the pink mantle, and endows the figure with a degree of expressiveness which is repeated in other surviving Apostles series, such as the one in Toledo Cathedral and the one in the Fine Arts Museum in Oviedo, where he appears without the symbolic goblet. St. Peter is the best known of Christ's 12 disciples. Jesus chose him to carry out a threefold mission: to look after his flock when he was gone, to uphold the faith, and to make that faith the foundation for Christ's future church. He therefore changed the disciple's original name, Simon, to Cephas, an Aramaic word with the same meaning as its Latin equivalent, rock. Dressed in a blue robe and yellow mantle with clear papal connotations, Simon Peter draws his clothing tightly around himself in a gesture of self-protection. In his left hand he has the keys to heaven, one gold representing the power of absolution, and the other silver, representing the power of excommunication.
Christ the Saviour is the principal work in the series. Like the image of St. Peter, it is signed in Greek characters, Domenikos Theotokopoulos Epoie. Christ is shown frontally, as in old icons, with his right hand raised in the Greek-style gesture of blessing, and his left hand resting on the orb of the world. Just as he did with his images of the other apostles, El Greco here offers a free interpretation of one of the themes most frequently represented in Christian iconography from the Middle Ages onwards, and a subject very characteristic of private commissions for small pictures for personal devotional use.
El Greco signed this portrait on the apostle's sword, Domenikos Theotokopoulos Epoiai. The artist included St. Paul in all of his apostles' series. Although he was not one of the canonical apostles, Paul considered himself the apostle of the Gentiles. In art, Paul is always shown carrying the sword with which he was decapitated, and a letter with the opening phrase of his epistle to his follower Titus, the first bishop of Crete. To Titus, first ordained bishop of the church in Crete.
St. James the Greater was called by Christ on the shore of the Sea of Galilee while he was fishing with Simon Peter and his brother Andrew. According to Hispanic tradition, the apostle later came to Spain, and his body was buried in Santiago de Compostela. This image differs from the habitual Spanish representation of James as an archetypal pilgrim figure. Here, he has only a small staff in his left hand. In the Apostle series, held in the cathedral, he has a book, an allusion to the gospel he wrote, but which never attained canonical status.
St. James the Less took charge of the church in Jerusalem after Christ's ascension, and was martyred there during Nero's persecution of the Christians. He is shown with a book in his left hand and his right hand raised in gesticulation, as if he is engaged in a dialogue both with the spectator and with a companion away to his right. The identification of the subject in the portrait has always been made difficult by the lack of any symbolic attributes.
The Apostle Simon appears dressed in a yellow mantle and a bluish-green robe, absorbed in an enormous book, which he is holding with both hands. The superb foreshortening of the book lends depth to the whole composition. Again, identification of the subject is made difficult because El Greco has not included the symbol of his martyrdom, the saw.
According to tradition, St. Jude, also known as Thaddeus, was beheaded with a halberd. In this painting he is shown holding that symbol of his death with both hands in a symmetrical composition in which his arms formed V-shapes with the lines of his shoulders. Technically, this work is in the second phase of execution, the stage at which the artist was adding color to the saint's robe and mantle. St. Andrew was St. Peter's brother and Christ's very first follower. Here he is holding the big X-shaped cross on which he would be crucified. Jacobus de Voragines' book, The Golden Legend, written in the 13th century, describes St. Andrew's martyrdom in detail. Andrew converted the wife of the Roman governor, Aegeus, to Christianity, and the governor had him arrested. The court ruled that Andrew should offer sacrifices to the gods, and when he refused, he was hung on the cross for 2 days until he died.